Since 1964, the United States, long considered to be the leader of the space race, has spent $21 billion on Mars exploration. Since the 60s, only 3 countries, the United States, the Soviet Union, and China, have made soft landings on Mars. The discovery of water sparked theories that Mars supported a civilization billions of years ago, making Mars the main mission of the modern space race. The more we explore the red planet, the more the marvels of Mars mystify the minds of scientists and truth seekers. Could Mars be a future home for humanity, or could it hold answers from an ancient civilization that just might save our own? These are the Alien Disclosure Files. In 1996, a research team of NASA scientists from the Johnson Space Center and Stanford University found evidence that strongly suggested primitive life may have existed on Mars more than 3.6 billion years ago.
It is well worth contemplating how we reached this moment of discovery. More than 4 billion years ago, this piece of rock was formed as a part of the original crust of Mars. After billions of years, it broke from the surface and began a 16 million year journey through space that would end here on Earth.
The NASA-funded team found the first organic molecules thought to be of Martian origin.
In '96, there was a big press announcement that some of you may even remember, in which we announced our findings.
The minerals featured characteristics of biological activity with primitive, bacteria-like organisms inside of an ancient Martian rock that fell to Earth as a meteorite.
Appropriately, it was the first rock to be picked up that year, rock number 84001. If this discovery is confirmed, it will surely be one of the most stunning insights into our universe that science has ever uncovered.
The rock, number 84001. It wasn't exactly what the public and press wanted to see. People wanted to see UFOs and aliens.
We argued that this suite of features taken together provided possible evidence for biology on Mars, ancient life on Mars.
The scientists, again, are not here to say they found ultimate proof or evidence, but the evidence they present will be exciting. But a chain of circumstantial events. It demands further scientific investigation. We must investigate, evaluate, validate this discovery.
The 2-year investigation was co-led by planetary scientists Dr. David McKay, Dr. Everett Gibson, and Kathy Thomas Capretta of Lockheed Martin. It also featured a Stanford team headed by Professor of Chemistry, Dr. Richard Zare, and 6 other NASA and university research partners.
And that was not really our intent, but that's what happened. The press blew it up much more than what we had actually said in the paper. If you read the paper, it was fairly conservative. And indeed, that was a terrible circus with hundreds of cameras and lots of questions, and the head of NASA and a few skeptics.
Life could have existed on early Mars in the first half of its history, and in fact it could have predated life on Earth. Every now and then an asteroid collides with Mars and could have lifted a piece of rock that included microbes, and these were tiny astronauts that came to Earth on these rocks. And so that it's quite possible that life was planted on Earth and it started on Mars first. So we are all Martians.
The findings were further scrutinized by many in the scientific community.
You have, of course, the community of believers that may represent extraterrestrial civilizations. There is the community of skeptics, and that includes scientists that dismiss this subject. But I'm trying to do what seems to me like common sense. Let's walk in the middle, collect the data, and then make statements based on this data. And unfortunately, common sense is not common.
The discovery built upon the Viking missions of the 1970s. Viking 1 and 2 were the first man-made probes to land on Mars and send back images of its surface. But the Viking landers didn't just send back images. They also seemed to confirm that Mars had once harbored life. Or did they?
We know they discovered life on Mars in 1976. They engineered tests that they sent with the Viking lander to determine if there was life on Mars and if there was evidence in the soil. These tests came back positive. They said yes, they are positive in 2 out of 3 of the tests, and therefore there is evidence of life on Mars. But when NASA got the results, they changed the rules of the test.
In 1996, the evidence of life on Mars again appeared to be conclusive, before once again becoming less so.
A meteorite found in Antarctica appeared to have the remnants of life in it, microscopic fossils that supposedly indicated that there was life off the planet. Bill Clinton went public with an announcement. NASA went public with an announcement. But then they walked the whole thing back.
Was NASA hiding something about the red planet? Was the government? What they couldn't hide was the presence of water on our nearest planetary neighbor. And where there is water, there is life. So the answers are quickly coming to the surface.
And early on, in the first half of its life, in the first 2 billion years, there were oceans on Mars. We see the evidence for that. If you look at the latest images from the Perseverance rover that NASA sent to Mars, you can see, the ground being very similar to what you find near rivers that dried up on Earth. It really looks as if there was liquid water on the surface. And what happened on Mars is that it lost its atmosphere.
For many ufologists, these discoveries only raised more questions. Could Mars have once been home to an ancient civilization? And if so, what happened to them? There was no doubt that if their world had once been inhabitable, it was now an inhospitable desert.
Could there have been an advanced civilization living there when it happened, capable possibly of nuclear war?
Perhaps the answers to what happened to the original inhabitants of Mars can be found with further exploration of the desolate surface. In fact, in May 2022, the Curiosity rover may have uncovered a clue to their whereabouts when it sent back this image. Could the answers lie behind the mysterious doorway? The Mars of 4 billion years ago would have looked very familiar to Earthlings today.
Before the magnetic field on Mars significantly weakened, it's conceivable that conditions could have been more favorable for the existence of life, as the magnetic field would have provided better protection against solar radiation. This could have potentially allowed for the preservation of liquid water on the Martian surface and increased the chance of habitability.
Just as the Earth was beginning to cool and develop its first oceans, the Martian core was cooling, shutting down the dynamo that sustained its magnetic field. That left the planet vulnerable to the solar wind, which clawed away the atmosphere and allowed the Martian water to evaporate into space. The planet became a desert.
It's not realistic to live on the surface of Mars at the current conditions. So a much better approach is, to go into caves, because there are these lava tubes are found in Hawaii. For example, on Earth, they are found on the moon. Basically, when there was volcanic activity, there were these streams of lava, very hot basaltic flows, and they cooled on the surface, so you end up getting a roof, a ceiling of crust. And then under that, there is still a flow that empties eventually, so you end up with a tunnel, with a tube. And if you go into those tubes, you can be protected from energetic particles. Also, the temperature variations will be moderated. So these lava tubes are the best locations for humans to occupy and build cities in them on the surface of Mars. And, you know, it's really ironic because prehistoric humans started in caves. And with post-historic humans, you know, like in the future, living in caves.
Could caves have provided the doorway to survival for Martians? An ancient civilization doomed by its planet's small size and inability to sustain a magnetic field might have found protection and shelter from a radioactive wasteland in the caves below the surface. On May 7, 2022, the 3,466th Martian day of a mission that was supposed to only last a year, the Curiosity rover captured this image of what appeared to be a handcrafted doorway leading into a cave.
The doorways have very distinct moldings and sharp edges. They look very much like the doorways during the Roman Empire or even Egyptian designs.
After carefully examining the photo from the rover, there appear to be many doors and small entrances.
The doorways were found to be smaller in size than the average human being, and more like a doggy door, if you will. Could this mean that Martians were small beings?
And then there is Cydonia. It was on those same Viking missions in the 70s that we got our first close images of the famous face on Mars, located in the Martian region known as Cydonia. Many ufologists believe this is the former home of a thriving ancient Martian civilization, now buried beneath the surface of the red planet. They also believe it could be ground zero for a nuclear explosion that ended that civilization. Was the magnetic field damaged as a result of this explosion? And who benefits from covering this explosive theory up? Cydonia could once have been a beautiful coastal retreat in the northern hemisphere of Mars. In those days, the Martian face might have towered above the Martian oceans. First observed by Viking 1 in its initial Mars orbit in 1976, the Cydonian face is actually a remnant massif, or clump of mountains. It was NASA that first pointed out that the rock formation looked like a human head.
These claims have fueled various theories and interpretations, suggesting the presence of artificial structures or evidence of past or current intelligent life on Mars.
Viking 1 also seemed to show pyramid-like structures with flattened tops in the Cydonia region. The pyramids paralleled those found in ancient civilizations on Earth, such as in Egypt or Mesoamerica. An ancient Martian civilization may have built these structures for ceremonial, cultural, or practical purposes.
The loss of that magnetic field also exposed Mars' surface to increased levels of radiation from space. This radiation includes cosmic rays, high-energy particles from the sun, which can have detrimental effects on biological organisms and geological processes.
If they had been able to build pyramids, how advanced could an ancient Martian civilization have become? Could they have developed nuclear technology? A nuclear apocalypse would be powerful enough to damage the Martian magnetic field and send life scattering underground. Based on the current condition of the Martian surface, some kind of nuclear event does seem plausible.
People studying Mars generally agree that there was a big cataclysm that happened to the planet. It bolsters the evidence that there was a nuclear event on Mars. Now, was it the people of Mars that actually created that? Or were they attacked by a more advanced civilization in outer space? We don't know. But some people believe that the descendants of Martians are us.
If Martian life were anything like Earth, a political, cultural, or religious divide could have caused the kind of nuclear event that the Earth has only narrowly avoided itself in the past.
An ancient Martian civilization could have developed advanced technologies, potentially surpassing or paralleling our own. They might have had sophisticated infrastructure, transportation systems, communication networks, and energy sources.
Ironically, some Earthlings are looking at Mars as an insurance policy against our own tendency to self-destruction. Billionaire Elon Musk is determined to build a city on Mars with 1 million people by 2050.
When Elon Musk wants to go back to Mars, it's just like, us trying to get back to our home where we were born. It may be, it's really ironic if you look, if there was a film of Mars, let's say the first forms of life formed on Mars, then they were delivered to Earth with Martian rocks. It's much easier to bring life from Mars to Earth than vice versa, because gravity on Mars is 38% of gravity on Earth. So it's easier for rocks to escape Mars. So this film will start with life on Mars, delivered to Earth, and then somehow on Earth, life becomes complex and intelligent, and then you have Elon Musk wanting to go to Mars.
Elon Musk believes that the survival of the human race is contingent on us getting off planet Earth, and that makes a lot of sense. Sooner or later, the Earth is going to be destroyed. It might take billions of years, it might not be us that does it, but it will happen. So getting to another planet and becoming a spacefaring civilization is really important. And Elon Musk says and does and is moving toward making Mars the first planet other than Earth that humans inhabit.
Others, like former Canadian Defense Minister Paul Hellyer, believe that we are already working with extraterrestrial life on the surface of Mars in some kind of galactic federation. Could the wealthy and powerful be harnessing this arrangement to speed our colonization of the Red Planet?
I believe that there definitely has been communication, according to the research I've done, with visitors and governments, and definitely people like Elon Musk know more than they probably let on, and the governments probably know more than they let on.
Humans may be living on Mars within the next decade. With every rocket launch, we get a little closer.
Launching the next generation of robotic explorers to the Red Planet.
What is behind the recent acceleration of our moves toward Mars?
If there is a galactic federation, it could explain why we're so bent on going back to the Red Planet. Was there an ancient civilization on Mars? Could we be their descendants?
The Galactic Federation seemed like a fairy tale for a long time. That was until just recently, when two credible witnesses stepped forward to confirm its existence. One of those sources, former Canadian Defense Minister Paul Hellyer, was put on the record by a most unlikely journalist.
My name is Devin Nicholson. I'm also known as Hannibal and the Blood Hunter as wrestlers. I have two wrestling characters. I've got a YouTube channel with about 400,000 subscribers, almost 300 million total video views. I've been interested in UFOs since about 2013 when I heard a report about the Canadian government admitting that there's more UFO sightings taking place. However, they were not going to fund research into this themselves.
Devin's interview with Paul Hellyer has more than 1 million views. But getting to the truth for this truth seeker wasn't easy.
So I had seen various interviews with Paul Hellyer. I had seen him at a press conference where he said publicly, and I believe he was the highest official to ever go on record saying at the time that UFOs were as real as airplanes in the sky. So I thought that I would try and get an interview with him. So it took me about 2.5 years to finally get the interview with him.
There have been face-to-face meetings between United States officials and visitors from other star systems, period. No equivocation. And so with that assurance, and my own conviction based on what I already knew, I said, I'll go to the meeting. And at the meeting, I said that UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead.
I believe that former Canadian Defense Minister Paul Hellyer 100% believes what he told me in that interview. But I do believe that a man with his level of credibility would not go on the record and risk his entire reputation if he hadn't done the research and heard it through enough horses' mouths to believe it was credible enough to put his reputation on the line of saying it himself.
It's generally agreed that Mars is going to be the first planet that humanity puts a colony on. But new technology such as the Webb telescope is pointing out the possibility of numerous habitable planets throughout the galaxy.
When humans inevitably set foot on Mars and begin colonization, it may be that we are really staging a homecoming and returning to our ancestral homeland. But even if we are not the children of Mars, the Red Planet will always have a lot to teach us. And perhaps its most important lesson is that of the doorway, the escape hatch from nuclear war, an ever-present warning about our species' constant threat of self-destruction.